Hello everyone, I hope we're having a great October. I hope you guys have had a good week, and I hope you all have fun and safe plans for Halloween this upcoming weekend if you celebrate it. That being said, speeches are done. You guys are finished. Grades are going to be in by the end of today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We can go over your speech, figure out how to make it better for next time. And I love talking speeches, so go ahead and reach out if you have any questions at all. Today, we are going to be talking about Chapter 7, which is listening. I know I've said this before, but I really do love this chapter. It's right up there for me with nonverbal comm and cultural communication. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the chapter incomes for listening are going to be to outline the listening process and goals for listening, list the advantages of listening well, identify changes to good listening and their remedies, identify types of listening that have unethical consequences, and describe how contexts affect listening, so where we're at. So listening versus hearing. This is a really important distinction for this class. Hearing is a physiological involuntary process of perceiving sound. So if you hear like a helicopter in the background, which you might right now, maybe it's an airplane, I don't know. That is hearing, that is not listening. But listening is the multidimensional process of recognizing, understanding, accurately interpreting, and responding effectively to the messages that you hear. So messages that are intentionally communicated by another person or animal. Specific components, so the listening process. Specific components are the affective component and the behavioral component. So the affective component refers to your attitude towards listening to a person or message. So how you feel about that thing that they're communicating. Like if you're listening to the presidential debate, how you feel about one side of the political spectrum versus the other, right? So, and then the behavioral component, so the way we behave after we get a message involves remembering how that message affected us, and responding to that message. So like being able to appropriately and adequately respond to something that someone has communicated to you or something that you've listened to them say. I almost said heard. Active listening. So active listening requires active participation in making choices about selecting and attending. So active participation means actively engaging in what they have to say to you, making sure you hear them and making sure we're not listening to ourselves inside our head or pretending to listen because we're distracted by something else, but really engaging in their words and how they're feeling about the story they're telling or the thing they're trying to communicate to you. And then passive listening is going to be failing to make active choices about selecting and attending. So failing to make those choices, failing or choosing not to engage because you're not interested in the topic they're talking about, or so on and so forth. Okay, and then we have relational listening. So relational listening is really focused on understanding and appreciating how another person feels. We're really listening to perpetuate the relationship, or we're really listening because we care about the other person. We want to develop a relationship with them, or we have an existing relationship with them that we're trying to maintain. Whereas analytical listening is about receiving and organizing all the information before making a judgment. So we are receiving information, we are stockpiling it in our head, organizing it, and trying to make it make sense. We engage in the sense-making process, and sometimes we engage in the retrospective sense-making process, where we organize all the information and then we proceed to have feelings or judgments about a thing that somebody is communicating to us. So we're being analytical about our choices. There's also task-oriented listening. So task-oriented listening is going to be focusing on the task at hand. So somebody's telling you all the things you need to get done for the day. You're focusing on that as opposed to the relational or the analytical aspects. You're really just trying to take a list. You're trying to make a list. You're trying to get all the things done. It's like a mental checklist. And then critical listening, this is the kind of listening we do when we listen to a presidential debate. We are evaluating information or trying to find any inconsistencies or errors in the story that someone's telling us. Or like, you would also probably see critical listening in the listening that a parent would do to a kid that's trying to tell a story to get them out of trouble, right? Like, we are critical of certain people for particular reasons, and we listen to them more critically than others, and we need to be aware of those times. Effective listening. So the value of listening well. Effective listening has the capacity to help your career. It can make you more task-oriented, it can make your leaders feel heard, or even as a leader, statistically, we are more likely to like our leaders if they listen to us. If you are a subordinate and your leader listens well, you will probably like that individual. It can save you time and money. If you listen effectively, it can create opportunities because you can network, and it can strengthen relationships because people really feel heard by you, or I guess listened to by you. They feel like what they have to say matters. They feel like their voice matters, and you are really giving them, by listening, you are really strengthening that relationship because they feel heard. Listening barriers. So listening barriers is any factor that interferes with our ability to hear, comprehend, and respond to information appropriately. So this could be, I don't know, this one's silly, but like you're in a long distance relationship, you're in the middle of a fight and your phone dies. Listening barrier, right? Or you have a helicopter going overhead because you live right next to John Wayne Airport. Or like all of these things are listening barriers. So anything that affects you and anything that affects the way you communicate with people. There are also environmental factors. So like the helicopter or the airplane would be an environmental factor. Unpleasant temperatures if you're too cold to think straight. Visual distractions if there's a lot of things happening. If you're talking in a crowded mall but you're distracted by people walking by, large groups. Biological factors are going to be physical or medical related issues to age or physical condition. So like if you have such a bad headache, you can't think straight, those kinds of things. And then multitasking. Multitasking severely limits our focus and attention as we shift from various tasks. So the way it's been explained to me, and I don't know, you're not going to be quizzed on this, but the way it's been explained to me is with multitasking, you can't focus on multiple things at once. Your attention is constantly back and forth from thing to thing to thing. So you're not giving one thing your undivided attention, but rather you're trying to do multiple simultaneously while bouncing back and forth, and you're not going to do as good a job at either. So like when I can tell myself I can grade and watch Grey's Anatomy, that's not true because I'm just bouncing back and forth from watching Grey's Anatomy to grading, and I can't totally focus on one thing or another. Motivational factors, so boredom, overexcitement, listening to a dull speaker. If you hate the topic matter, you are probably not going to be listening well, or you're going to be listening well and very analytical or very critical of whatever the speaker has to say. And then just negative attitudes about listening, believing that talking is more powerful than listening, or you're just overconfident and lazy about communicating, or listening apprehension because you're nervous about the message that the communicator is trying to communicate to you. But negative attitudes negative attitudes about listening make it really hard to be a good listener. So being aware of those, identifying those in you is a really good way to start trying to overcome those barriers. And then we have unethical listening, which really starts with defensive listening. When you're in a fight with someone and you are not listening to them to hear their perspective, but rather you are listening to try to find flaws in their argument, and you're trying to defend yourself because you feel attacked, and you're not totally listening to what they have to say or their qualm with whatever it is because you are not totally listening, or bias listening, which is listening while selecting messages you want to listen to while disregarding other messages. So bias listening, like if you have an inherently biased opinion of the piece of information that you're receiving, and I get it, we're human beings, we're subjective, we cannot totally be objective no matter how much you want to think you can. But it's really good to be aware of these really severe biases when we're having and engaging in these conversations, because we can't take ourselves out of our biases. We can attempt to take ourselves out of our worldview and our thoughts and emotions about a particular issue, but we can't totally remove ourselves. So this includes insensitive listening to only the words and specifically pinpointing the words that they got wrong, but you're not really listening to the full picture. You're not listening to the emotional content of what the person's trying to communicate with you. Because we all know that sometimes when we're upset, we can't think of the right word. And so we may not be communicating our messages as clearly as we want to be. Self-absorbed listening, unethical listening, part 2. So self-absorbed listening is going to be hearing all the information that's useful for you to achieve your own goal. So if someone's telling you a story and then you just wanted to confirm something, like you're waiting for it, you hear what you want to hear and then you check out. This includes monopolistic listening, so listening to control the interaction. So if we really want to be in control of what it is that the other person's communicating, or we really want to shape a narrative, we do this. We try to control the interaction. We take bits and pieces of what we want to hear, and typically in self-absorbed listening, it's the messages that really support us or reinforce our ideas, or it's what we want to hear. And this can include attacking and ambushing, right? So if we're feeling attacked and we're being self-absorbed, we're going to try to control the situation, control the interaction by attacking the other person and perhaps ambushing them with information. And then pseudo listening, it's when you're really thinking about something else and you go, yeah, or nodding when you're really just in your own mind or you're on your phone and we're not really listening to the content, but we want the other person to think we're listening because we don't want to be rude. But pseudo listening is something that's really important for us to be aware of. I do it all the time when I'm texting, but that's why I don't take my phone to meals with friends or meetings, because I know this is something that I personally am susceptible to. And then listening contexts. So where we're listening, we listen in relational and situational contexts. We listen to people to build those relationships, and in specific situations where people are telling stories or we're getting to know somebody, or if we're listening in cultural contexts where the ways people communicate may not be the same as ours, and we need to understand that. Or even in the technological context, we all know that emails sometimes come off way harsher than they're intended, or we all know that sometimes text messages have a connotation if you put a period or don't put any emojis. So we really need to understand the context in which we're listening and adapt to those as best we can to communicate effectively. And that is all I have for you today. I hope that we are having a good time. I hope that you watch this, and please read this chapter. It's a really important one. Reach out if you have any questions. Reach out if you want to have any meetings. Moving forward, it's just going to be the chapter lectures, the discussion and the quiz every week until we get to our final, or until we get to our the next paper due, the final, and then the final speech, which isn't for a while. Keep an eye on that syllabus for important dates. Reach out if you have any questions. I love to hear from you guys, and I hope that you are all having a great day. All right, bye y'all.